What's up, everybody? We are back on Brian Kohberger today because tomorrow is the hearing to determine what's going to happen with these cameras. We're going to jump right into it today, looking at this notice of hearing. It is going to be September 13th, 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern. And we are going to hear more argument about whether or not cameras should be allowed in this courtroom. And throughout today's video, we're going to do two polls. The first is going to be whether or not you think cameras should be in the courtroom. And the second, whether or not you think they will be in the courtroom, because those could be two different answers. And as those polls are live, I will also give my answer and what I think is going to happen with cameras in the courtroom and what I would like to see happen with cameras in the courtroom. So go ahead and hit that like button if you haven't already and subscribe to our page, as we are going to continue to discuss this case and discuss the legal process and what's fair and how we need to make sure we're doing our part as the general public that's interested in this case and watching this case and following this case and discussing this case, that we are doing the right things so that the judge can't look to us and say, this is why you can't have nice things, or more directly, this is why we can't have cameras in the courtroom. So we've asked this so many times, but as we continue talking about it in today's video, we have a bit of a different explanation by the state. What we've heard so far from the state, from the defense, is that in order to have a fair trial, especially for the defendant, and in order to not poison the potential jury pool in this case, we must not allow cameras. That's kind of been the common theme throughout the entirety of this camera litigation. Well, today, the state adds some different arguments. I say today, I think it was Friday. The state added some different arguments that we're going to hear at this hearing, but that was kind of a more common reason. We've seen things either be covered up by cameras before, having something over the screen when they present certain evidence in cases or in trials that we've watched together. And I want your input on it. I want to know what you think about it. So, John, why don't you go ahead and throw up that first poll, which is whether or not this chat, who's here right now, first 1,500 of you, do you believe cameras should be in the courtroom? And as you're thinking about that and answering that, we are going to bring up the state's response to the defendant's motion to remove cameras from the courtroom. So here we go. State's response to defendant's motion to remove cameras from the courtroom comes now. The state of Idaho, by and through the Latah County prosecuting attorney, and respectfully submits the following response to the defendant's motion to remove cameras from the courtroom. Filed herein on August 24th, 2023. That's when the original motion was filed. As the court and the parties, including interveners, which is the media, are aware, this case has and continues to attract significant public and media attention, involving not only traditional media, but also a broad range of social media related postings, blogs, podcasts, and other disseminations, etc. This case also involves significant physical and emotional components, not only by virtue of the nature of the killings themselves, but also by a myriad of circumstances surrounding the victims, their associates, friends, family, the residents of 1122 King Road, and so forth. This case will necessarily involve not only evidence of a graphic, just got a text message, of a graphic nature, but also testimony from a number of young and vulnerable witnesses. A lot of people have been asking, who's going to testify in this case? Who's the state going to call? Is this person or that person going to be a witness for the plaintiff, or are they going to be exculpatory for the defense? We heard about interviews and depositions taking place already throughout this case. Well, we get some answers here in this motion. So it says this case will necessarily involve not only evidence of graphic nature, which again, we've seen in other cases how that's been blocked out by TV cameras. They've had cameras leave the courtroom in certain times. They've had screens covered up so the gallery couldn't even see. So we know that graphic information is going to be a problem that the public should not see in this case. So that's a good argument by the state, something that's worked and been used in the past, trying to apply it more broadly to cameras, right? But again, it also includes the testimony, meaning they will be testifying from a number of young and vulnerable witnesses. So who are these witnesses? These include the surviving roommates of Madison Mogen, Kaylee Gonsalves, Ethan Chapin, and Xana Kernodle, and also a number of University of Idaho co-eds and families and friends. So the roommates, a lot of people have had questions about the roommates, questions for the roommates. What do they know? What did they see? Pretty interesting to hear now. The state saying they will be testifying in this case. Doesn't mean they'll be testifying at trial. They could be testifying in some motion hearings. Who knows what we're going to have between now and then? Motions to suppress, motions in limine, and then, of course, the trial. So for their protection, we need cameras to be out of the courtroom. Well, why would cameras being in the courtroom be a danger? Let's keep reading. In addition to, and at least partially as a result of, the substantial traditional and social media coverage, certain witnesses have already been subjected to threats and harassment, including physical intrusions directed at not only the witnesses and other university co-eds, but their extended families and friends. So I can remember a time back when the original probable cause affidavit came out where people felt like certain roommates, certain delivery people might have more information than they're letting on. And I know some people, nobody in this chat, hopefully and probably, went so far as to say they were part of it, they did it, they're part of the cover-up, whatever it may be. But that was a thing on the internet. There were statements made, probably just judging by how some people talk to me and interact with me on social media. I'd be willing to bet there were some very overboard, horrible, mean, threatening, and harassing comments to some of these surviving roommates, to some of the friends, and to some of the people that may or may not have been around the house that night. So I think that this is a legitimate argument and problem. That these, now listen, I see some people in the chat. These aren't kids. They're college students. I agree. They're adults. And guess what? Brian Kohberger's life's on the line. So you're an adult. In every case, it's hard to be a witness, but you got to come and do your job as a person, as a human being who lives in society. If you saw something, you have to testify to it. So I think that that is a legitimate concern. And I think we all need to remember that when we talk about witnesses and potential victims and people that come out with allegations or have some testimony surrounding a case, not to demonize them for what they saw or heard. You can disagree with it. And I disagree with it all the time. I talk about the scrutiny of cross-examination. That's the most important tool in trial, especially for criminal defense lawyers. And they should cross-examine witnesses. They should hold their feet to the fire. They should make sure what they're saying is true. But that's very different than some of the things that happen online. The state fully understands the enormous value that responsible media has in helping the public to understand the true facts of what occurs in court. Now, that statement right there is a big sentence. The state is agreeing. They're agreeing that the media it takes a huge part in helping the public to understand the true facts of what occurs in court. If anybody has listened to our podcast this week, my dad, JD, and I talked about the media's rights throughout this process, and it was timely because it just dropped yesterday, and we're actually going to do a sneak peek for everybody that is watching this live right now. We are going to automatically redirect you to the video version of that podcast where we do a deep dive into the media's rights throughout the trial process, why we have the free press, why we have the media, why we want them there as a society. And this one line here by the state is a good start. The enormous value that responsible media has in helping the public to understand the true facts of what occurs in court. Now, they're going to follow it with a but, of course. But stick around to the end of this video. This video is not going to be very long, maybe 30 minutes ish. And then you can check out the podcast. It'll automatically redirect you there. The state believes, however, that those ends can be accomplished without the need for camera and video images or the physical presence of cameras in the courtroom. So what that means is they want people to be able to be in there, take notes, and report on the press. So they think that we should not have cameras. So what do you guys think? Well, over 1,000 votes have been levied for should cameras be allowed in the courtroom, and 94% of you said yes, they should. They should. Now, John, put up poll number 2. Poll number 2 is, will cameras be allowed in the Kohberger courtroom? Will they be allowed? We know that the majority of the chat thinks they should, but will they be? Let's continue on with the state's argument. Based on the above, the state is concerned that allowing the presence of cameras in the courtroom will have a substantial chilling effect on the ability of witnesses to openly, fully, and candidly testify about some horrible occurrences. In addition, the state has a responsibility to take steps to ensure a fair trial for all involved, including Brian Kohberger. So the state agrees with the defense that some people may not want to testify. They may not want to come do something that's necessary for Brian Kohberger or for the state to get justice, to have a fair trial. And if they do that because of the media, that's a problem. And I see people saying, can we really trust mainstream media? Can we really trust one journalist? Can we really trust somebody to sit in there and report? Look what they did to Johnny Depp and Rittenhouse. And a lot of people are mentioning different cases that they think the media got wrong. I don't necessarily disagree with you. You shouldn't get all of your information from one source, including me, which is why we read from the state and the defense and what they all have to say, right? We're in a day and age where people can use their own eyes, their own ears, their own brains to make their own decisions. We are not a monolith. We're not a bunch of sheep following whatever one person tells us to do. And we can look back in history at all the times that has happened. It has happened a lot. But today's society and public wants to know. And I think that's a better way to live. More information, doing things appropriately, not being used without your knowledge, saying, oh, look, all these people agree with everything this political party says. It's like, no, we actually don't. Let's dig in and see, what does this bill say? Where are these trillions of dollars going? Because, yeah, we all like better infrastructure. We all want to help people. We all care about physical health and mental health. But what does that actually look like? And where is this money coming from? Where is it going? I don't want to go off into a tangent. But the point is, we the people, being able to get the information directly is so important. Being able to see and hear what's happening in our justice system. And if we have a problem with it, and we vote for judges in our jurisdictions, we vote for the legislators, we need to know this stuff. How do we know what judge? I mean, I can't tell you how many people are like, hey, which judge should I vote for? Of course, I tell them because I know the judges and I know the people usually that are asking me. But what if they could watch how these judges act in trials? How the state attorney's office is run by an elected state attorney in some jurisdictions? Very interesting stuff to me. So then, what does the state say here? When this decision came out in Vallow Daybell, I said, we have another high-profile case in Idaho. I'd be willing to bet this is going to be cited. And here it is. It's been cited many times. Judge Boyce's decision in the Vallow Daybell case, attached to the state's June 6, 2023 brief on video and photographic coverage provides a thorough examination of the issues before the court. The state reiterates those same concerns, including the issue of jurors accessing the broadcasts and seeing evidence which has not been put in front of them, and witnesses potentially viewing the broadcasted testimony of prior witnesses. So they're citing what happened in Vallow Daybell. And I think, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, I think the interest level did go down when there were no cameras in the courtroom, but they were still recording things and then releasing the recordings later, which maybe that's what this court will do, something like that. They're already not live streaming, but releasing the video later. So they've already put some of that protection in place. But will they take it a step further? Will they remove cameras altogether? And will they start just recording and playing the audio? The state respectfully submits that the appropriate course of action will be for the court to prohibit cameras in the courtroom, both still and video, at a minimum during trial and during any other court proceeding at which victims such as described above might be called to testify. So again, mentioned just above, I didn't hit the fact that they said jurors and witnesses may have access to and see evidence they shouldn't, or people that testified prior to their testimony. Well, what's interesting is releasing the audio the next day doesn't necessarily prevent that from happening, right? If you have a multi-week trial and I'm testifying on week 4, I'm going to be able to listen to weeks 1, 2, and 3 if they're releasing them on a delay, posting them on YouTube like happened in the Vallow Daybell case. So that didn't remove that problem. So what are we doing? Are we just making it harder? Are we making it less of a spectacle? I definitely think at the very least there needs to be a delayed publishing of what's happening in the courtroom. So again, people that are interested, they're not promised it to be live. They're not promised it to be contemporaneous. But I think that they should at least have the ability to see how this plays out, especially when people have a lot of questions about this case and a lot of questions about how this is going to go. And I fear that if you lock it all behind a curtain, no matter how this case resolves, whatever the outcome may be, there are going to be people that question the result and the outcome. And that's not what we want in our judicial system. We want people to have confidence in our judicial system. And I think that some of the cases people have mentioned, whether it's Johnny Depp or Kyle Rittenhouse or whatever, after watching it, regardless of what you thought about it before, you're like, wow, I actually think that's where the evidence pointed. Whether you liked it or didn't like it, or, had differences of opinion about certain factors in the case, whether it's lifestyles of the rich and famous, drugs, alcohol, guns, whatever, in those two cases, I think the open court really helped people understand the process and why we had the outcomes we did. So I'm waiting on John to send me the results of the second poll, but I think you guys already know where I stand on should cameras be in the courtroom. And actually, I'm going to ask you to stick around for the deep dive because I talk more about whether or not I think they should on the podcast. So stick around for that redirect. But will they be in the courtroom? That's a question that's going to be answered tomorrow. Actually, that's a question that's going to be argued tomorrow. The judge will probably reserve ruling, but it's going to be argued tomorrow. And hopefully we'll be able to see that. I don't even know that we'll be able to see that hearing, right? Open court promotes honesty. I agree. People are going to talk. People are going to talk. People are going to make jokes and memes and whatever it may be. To a lesser extent, I think if cameras are not allowed. So will cameras be in the courtroom? Again, over 1,000 votes. 69% say no. 31% say yes. So 94% think cameras should be there, but only 31%. So a third of people that think cameras should be there think they actually will be there. And I like these percentages because that's kind of, I think, where my leans are as well. Just BKZ. If they are worried about jury issues, could they restrict cameras from pretrial hearings while permitting them in the main trial? Absolutely. And just BKZ, here's what's interesting about this and the law and judges and judicial discretion. If the lawyers bring a problem to you, and lawyers a lot of times are problem solvers, right? And judges are lawyers. So you bring a problem to you and let's say you tell me the main problem is jurors might hear information that's inadmissible evidence that isn't going to come out in trial. But we all agree The media is an important purpose in seeing behind the curtain. And so the public can see and understand court proceedings. So how do we fix that? Well, one way we can fix that is that's fine. Let's not show cameras if they're going to talk about any evidence that may be inadmissible. But once it gets to trial, the jury's seeing all that evidence anyway. So how could you poison the jury pool or have them see something they shouldn't see if they're there seeing it in person? But does that fix the other problems that have been brought to the court's attention? And the court has to balance that. But I absolutely think that's a possible outcome for this. DJ Farlow, I'm curious whether the testimony from some of these witnesses is going to be used as character evidence. Could be. I think most of the testimony from the roommates that were there is going to be fact evidence. What they see, what they hear, what they do. Sharon, thank you for the super chat. Heidi, cameras allow for society to learn and understand the judicial system and process. I believe as a society, everyone is invested in keeping our democracy intact. Heidi, I think this is a great comment, and I agree with you. And we dive deep into this on the podcast, which we're about to play. Alley Cat, after Depp trial, I don't trust the press. What was reported by the press and what actually happened was way different. Cameras give transparency, just put parameters on their coverage. I agree. And we understand what witnesses are credible or not, because if somebody just reports to you, oh, law enforcement officer said this, that, and the other, we're like, oh, okay. But if you watch and you're like, that's not really what he said, or during cross-examination, I'm not so sure I agree with him or believe him, or all the mistakes that he made in his report, can we really trust that the rest of the report is correct? Or an expert said X, Y, and Z. It's like, yeah, but are they really an expert? Just because one side calls them an expert doesn't mean they're an expert. And I think the cameras have a lot to do with that transparency. Pat said, I like the cameras in so I can see the diagrams. Helps you understand the process as a whole. I agree with you, Pat. Sharon, in Melly's trial, they cut out the face of a witness for protection for different reasons, but still these witnesses' reasons for anonymity is legit. I agree. And maybe turn the cameras off when these specific people are testifying. Maybe distort their voice. Maybe don't show their face. I think there are less restrictive measures that the court could take before removing cameras. But it's not a good sign when judges within the same jurisdiction you're in have already made this decision. Caslow. So Ruby is on one side while the 12-year-old boy is on the other side. How old do you have to be on either side? I don't know what you mean by this. How old do you have to be on the other side? I'm not sure what you mean by this, but since you brought up Ruby Frankie, I'm recording a video today. So many of you, when I asked, let me know what you want me to break down, what you want me to react to learn more about the situation. So many of you sent me clips, podcasts, videos, news reports about Jodi Hildebrandt, Ruby Frankie's co-defendant, her niece, who is an alleged victim of Jodi Hildebrandt. And I found a shorter, like 20-ish minute clip from a news interview with her that I picked specifically for some of the stuff she said in it. And we're going to break that down and post that video tonight. So if you are following this case, make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit that reminder bell. So when we post it tonight, somewhere between 8 and 9 o'clock, you can check it out. Let me know what you think in the comments. Miss Always Right Ryan. After the debacle regarding the Murdaugh trial, I think cameras should be allowed. People don't trust law enforcement or courts as it is. They need to see everything for themselves. I think giving confidence to the people and the public who live and are subjected to this judicial system. When the sovereign citizen stuff was happening with Darrell Brooks, people were like, yeah, he can say, I don't submit to this government, but it's like, but you do. You live here, you break the law, you're going to the prison that this government controls and that these laws, this is the punishment for breaking these laws, whether you agree with them or not. So understanding them is paramount to nothing. We've got to understand them. Millie, if I was on trial and innocent, I would want the scrutiny of cameras to avoid media bias. The media has convicted BK already. Openness can only help him surely show his side. So honestly, I can see, and you guys let me know in the chat whether you agree with Millie or not, because I can see this going both ways. If you were on trial and you were innocent, but everybody in the media said you did it and wanted to convict you, would you want the potential jurors seeing that stuff before coming in to see your case? Or would you rather them be blocked from it? Because I can see it from both ways. Now, I do agree with this position that you have that it's already kind of happened. So at this point, if I'm Brian Kohberger, I like that some people are seeing holes in this case. Some people are asking questions, saying, how do we really know? Well, they better provide this evidence. I hope they have something like that. How legit is the DNA? So that when they come to trial, they may think he did it, but they're going to listen, try to get these questions answered as the public. Now, the jurors should definitely not think he did it when they show up for this trial. Azam, thank you for the super sticker. And then Azam here. Hey, Peter, off topic. Could you please wish a happy birthday to my baby sister, Azam Norafiza Jumberi? Her birthday was yesterday, September 12th. That's funny because it's still September 12th where I am, Azam. So look at that. She gets an extra birthday wish on her actual birthday because it is actually September 12th as I'm recording this, sitting here live. So happy birthday, Azam Norafiza Jumberi. I'm sure I said that wrong, but I did my best. Happy birthday. Capelli. Cameras show the manipulation of the truth from cops and expert witnesses. It also, I think, keeps lawyers honest. And if they're not honest and they're making either just blatantly wrong arguments, intellectually dishonest arguments, if they're handling evidence inappropriately, if they do something like that, you might never know it if there's even just audio recording, but no cameras in the courtroom, and a juror is offended by some of the way they handle evidence, and that becomes part of the case. We don't know. If a criminal defendant is flipping off the jury, laying their head on the table, plugging their ears, you might not know that if there's not cameras in the courtroom. And then we might say, how could they have possibly lost this case? There was not enough evidence to prove this case beyond a reasonable doubt. Well, guess what? If you're flicking off the jury and putting your head down and making audible sounds throughout the trial, they may think, yeah, they definitely did it. And they may have taken that into account. We would never know that. Cheryl, thank you for the super sticker. I meant for trial specifically, before unsure. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I would think that is a compromise we would all be okay with if it's like no cameras in the hearings, but yes, camera for the trial. Because that's really the part. I mean, the hearings are a big part. I mean, they're a bigger part of the case in the trial halftime about what's going to come in and what's not. And you can kind of figure out what the outcome is going to be based on what's going to come in and what's not. Sharon, hope you're doing well, Peter. Thanks for all the hard work and keeping up with everything. There's so much going on now. So much going on, but it's really interesting. And this Ruby Franke case is really interesting to me. I actually talked to Emily Baker today, who is on vacation, and Emily Baker told me that she's not so sure that some of the comments that Ruby allegedly made in that child dependency hearing, accusing her son of doing certain things, she's not so sure that's true. So that would add a crazy element. And Emily, I think, is dropping a podcast on it either today or tomorrow. So go check out Emily D. Baker's podcast and listen to what she has to say about, some potential misinformation in this case. That's what she told me, potential misinformation in this case. And she's got the scoop. So check out her podcast, Emily D. Baker. I think it's on the podcast, but go ahead and subscribe to her YouTube channel and her podcast. Nirvana. I just want to see if he's as ice cold as he appears. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Everybody's got a different personality, different way of dealing with trauma and, events that are life-changing. And honestly, if we could have criminal defendants that don't show too much emotion, usually that we would see that as a benefit. But again, people can also hold it against him. Caslow, will the 12-year-old boy on the other side of Ruby, just like Johnny v. Amber case, who will be on the other side of Ruby? Well, the 12-year-old boy. Oh, okay. So this is okay. So I think I understand what you're saying. So parties in a case. In the Ruby Franke case, she is the criminal defendant. So the person sitting at the other table on the other side will be the state of Utah. So the government would be against Ruby Franke and her co-defendant. The 12-year-old boy is the victim. And while the state does not directly represent the victim and they can have their own lawyers, they do represent the interests of the victim and the public at large to prosecute and convict criminals who are a danger to that public. So that's how criminal cases work. Sorry about that. SAK. The problem isn't cameras in the courtroom. It's the media attention before the trial. And it's what people do with what the cameras show, right? It's with society as a whole. That's kind of the problem. Lady Law Sandra. I think keeping cameras out causes speculation. Yeah. I mean, and that's the other thing, right? Listen, we can screw this up as society either way they want. We can screw it up with too much information and too much access, but we can screw it up with too little. It's like, ho, ho, ho. Did you hear what happened in court today? I heard Will Thompson was real angry and nasty. It's like, well, was he or was he not? Or was that just one person's perception? I mean, I'm sure you guys follow other lawyers, maybe even Emily D. Baker. And I'm sure her and I have watched the same hearing and come to different conclusions or had different thoughts or different points to make. And that doesn't mean one person's right or wrong. Sometimes there is one person that's right and one person that's wrong. But different perspectives are good. And that's why we encourage and like to see different perspectives and thoughts in the chat. Dawn, welcome to the membership crew. It's a good question, Annie. Misinformation is accidental, right? Disinformation is an intentional lie. This will make you better, but know it will make them worse. That's a good question. The difference between misinformation and disinformation. Vying for no cameras leaves one to think there's something worth hiding, not trustworthy at all. And I will say, I didn't see any of this watching the Vallow Daybell case, but there were absolutely people that said that they felt like Judge Boyce was trying to hide something. I have no idea. I never thought that. I never felt that way. But when they have this, pulling the cameras from the courtroom argument, it's tough. All right. Azam, in your opinion, how could they find an unbiased jury for this case? If they decide to change the venue, does it really help? Thanks, Peter. I don't know that change of a venue would help. I think their best bet is to find people that are open-minded, that may have heard the allegations, because they're going to hear the allegations at the beginning of the case already. So the fact that you've heard that Brian Kohberger was arrested for this horrific crime that affected our community, fine. But that's not enough to make them biased and make them not able to be a juror in this case. So that is important. And I think we have to remember that just because they've heard about it, just because they've seen an article on this case, just because they've watched somebody talk about it on the news, does not mean certainly that they're not going to be a fair and unbiased juror in this case. Just Joe. Peter, can we follow the Reed case from Boston? If you guys want me to follow this case, let me know. I have had a couple, not a ton, not as many as Ruby Frankie, requests for this. I honestly have not looked into it at all, so I'd have to start from scratch on it. But if enough people care about it, let me know in the comments. Netwoman. I wouldn't necessarily have a problem with the audio and character sketches. However, the audio is always terrible. Between the fans and typing. I agree. The audio is tough. And sometimes what's hard with the audio, what I didn't like about Vallow Daybell, and I actually liked when East Idaho News clipped it out saying like, hey, this was this person's testimony. This is this person's testimony. This is the opening statement. Because just off the audio, if you don't know everybody involved, it's like, I don't know who's talking when. Multiple female voices, multiple male voices. So it's hard to even tell who's talking when. YOI said, can you cover the YNW Melly hearing on Friday? Yeah, absolutely. If there's ever a hearing in a case that I'm covering, send it to me on Instagram or Twitter. At Tragos Law on Instagram and Lawyer on Twitter. DM it to me. And if it's a case I'm already covering, you better believe I'll try to cover as many hearings and important things as I can. People saying the Reed case is highly divisive. Great. That's just what we love here. I mean, I can't even read a probable cause affidavit without people going off on me as if I know every single person on the internet. More on that in the video tonight. If you want to hear my response, and just relax, everybody. Relax. I'm just here talking about legal cases, trying to read legal documents, talk about how witnesses and statements can affect legal cases. That's it. All right. So here's what I'll say. We are about to redirect this to our deep dive media in the courtroom. What are their rights? Do we think they should be there? Should be there? Get Big George's take. My dad is going to come on. We're going to discuss that. JD as well, former prosecutor, now just started working for us over the last couple months, but he's been on the state side his whole career. So we're going to deep dive into that, and should be an automatic redirect as soon as the outro ends. So make sure to hit the like button on this video before you leave, and hit the like button on that video when you get there, and also subscribe to that page. It's our podcast only channel page, so that we don't clog this page up with all of our podcast series that we just do periodically. Then we take breaks. We're not going to post as often on there. Max Sauce, any chance you can cover Sidney Powell? Again, another case I know nothing about. So if people want that case, let me know in the comments. Okay, so here goes the outro. And then again, subscribe to that channel, do all the things, like it when you get over there. I'm out of here. Love you guys. Till next time. Peace. Thanks for watching another episode of The Lawyer You Know. If you enjoyed this episode, please hit the thumbs up and share with your friends who might be interested here on YouTube. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. You can also follow us on all social media, Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, at Lawyer You Know. But on Instagram, we are still at Tragos Law. So look us up on there. And don't forget to listen to the Lawyer You Know podcast, available on all major podcast platforms. If you have a case you want to talk to us about, if it's a personal injury case, wrongful death, catastrophic injury, car accident, or slip and fall case, please email us, lawyeryouknow@gmail.com. Of course, all of these links I just mentioned are included in the description below on this episode and every episode. So until next time, this is Peter Tragos, the Lawyer You Know.